Missouri School of Journalism, welcome to Global Journalist. I'm David Reed. Every year, the Alfred Friendly Foundation places international journalists in newsrooms around the United States. There are two goals: to impart American journalistic traditions and to aid efforts worldwide to report fair and accurate news. The fellows this year came to our journalism school in early July for training. On today's show, we'll hear from three journalists in the program. Khalid Khattak and Waqas Banoori are from Pakistan. We'll hear from them later in the show. First up, Emran Hossain. He's a reporter from Bangladesh who works for bdnews24.com. His coverage includes the fast-growing garment industry in his home country. In April, he started working for the Huffington Post in Washington, D.C. That same month, the Rana Plaza garment factory in Bangladesh collapsed, killing more than 1,000 workers. Emran talked about covering the tragedy for the Huffington Post and about his previous coverage of the industry and its frequent disasters.
It was a very unfortunate incident to happen in Bangladesh, but it was a kind of an opportunity for me when it happened, actually, professionally. Because the Huffington Post liked that I covered this story for the news outlet.
Right, for BD News 24?
No, for the Huffington Post.
But when you were in Pakistan, when you were in Bangladesh, you covered the garment industry.
Yeah. It happens every year, you know. A lot of fire is taking place, and even the last year, more than 100 people were killed in another fire. Okay. And factory has been collapsing every other year.
So after this happened, they turned to you.
Yeah, they asked me that why don't I cover this issue from Washington for this Huffington Post.
Right.
So I started covering that over telephone conversation. Okay.
Providing a great amount of insight to this topic that they wouldn't have without you.
What the Huffington Post wanted from me is that what is the relation between the Western retailers and the garment factory workers there.
Okay.
So I wrote a report that the headline was like that: "Who is to blame? Look in the mirror." So what I tried to say in that report, and not me, it was actually the workers and the manufacturer, what they said, that it is only the American or the Western retailers who can make things change in Bangladesh.
Because of the demand for these cheap clothes.
Yeah. This is what they call it, the fast fashion or things like that. Though, as long as they are willing to get clothes at this price. So a poor country like Bangladesh, where 160 million people lives and over 75% of them are poor. So they will work even if you don't give them money.
Overall, how would you, now that you've worked within the United States media, how would you compare and contrast it with the media in Bangladesh?
Theoretically, I don't find much difference between the media in United States and Bangladesh, because I see a lot of advertisement as it happens in Bangladesh. You know what I see. I can hardly remember that I saw a story that tells about an American farmer, and it was widely covered, or I could get to see this. I didn't see that kind of report. It is always about the consumers, the business, or the politicians that interest the people, the middle class people, or the rich people. So there are no voice of the poor. So I think it's almost the same, but at least here there are individual freedom. So
yeah, how free are journalists in Bangladesh compared with here? I know you wrote about the case of the 4 bloggers being arrested with the blasphemy law. Does that illustrate the problems facing journalists?
Actually, there is no point to discuss this freedom of expression, I think, because all the media in Bangladesh, they are mostly owned either by the politicians or by the businessmen. So the reporters are trained to think in a way that they never want to question anything that goes against their owners.
So there's self-censorship.
Self-censorship is pretty much strong in Bangladesh.
Okay. And so, go ahead.
and even the bloggers, regarding the arrest of the 4 bloggers. So they were raising a question that it has been a long cherished dream for Bangladeshis, because in 1971 the country had a war, liberation war, and we won the freedom for a constitution that says that this country should be secular.
Right.
But our politicians have always been mixing religion with politics since then, over the 4 decades. And this blogger was trying to make this point that it should not be this.
So the bloggers were saying that there should be a separation of church and states, and then they were arrested. Tell us about what happened.
And some of them were making points that religion is the easiest tool to abuse people, and politicians make use of this tool very often, and they have been using this since the partition. So they were trying to, and they called for a program at the city intersection, that is Shahbag.
Right.
So a lot of people turned up there and supported that demand. But the mainstream politicians, they always cash in on the religious belief of the people. So they turned against this blogger, because their move has turned a lot of people against the mainstream politicians' policy of mixing religion with politics. So they had them arrested, 4 of them, and one of them specifically wrote against the Prime Minister the day before he was arrested.
Okay.
So,
and what has happened since the arrest? They're still
they stayed they stayed over a month in jail. One of them was just attacked by some Islamist militants for his writing against the religion just in January this year. So he was still recovering from that injury when he was arrested, and he was suffering from these injuries while he was still in jail. So it took over a month for them to get released on bail. Still, they are still accused in several cases.
Okay. And how has the arrest of these bloggers caused even more self-censorship? What's been the impact of this crackdown?
One of these 4 bloggers is identified as the first generation blogger in Bangladesh. He has been blogging since 2006, so when blogging began in Bangladesh. So it definitely had an impact on the people who are trying to write, because they are now afraid. They might get arrested. So it will definitely have impact.
And tell us about the Shahbag movement and that how that impacts journalism. Maybe just explain what it is.
The blogger. In mainstream media, bloggers are not considered as journalists.
Okay.
But the point, bloggers have always been the right person since they emerged in our country to make the right question. What was happening? Any injustice is taken against the mass people. They were the first to raise the question.
So the bloggers,
rather than journalists, because the journalists are either loyal to the politicians or to the businessmen, to the news outlets owned by them.
Okay. So the bloggers have been the advocates for change.
Yeah, if you talk about journalism in the real sense, I think this is the first attack the attack on the bloggers is the attack on journalism there in Bangladesh.
Okay.
The arrest.
And what are some other examples of how social media has exposed wrongdoings in Bangladesh? And
I can give you an example. I investigated a story in Bangladesh last year. It was about a police force. It is called the Rapid Action Battalion. They call it elite police force to combat crimes. So they circulated a story with the help of media that a gang was out on the city to kidnap kids, and maim them for begging, dismember their parts of the body and send them for begging on the streets.
That's terrible.
So I started investigation, and I had a 3-4 months I investigated 3 to 4 months.
Yes.
And I found out that it was completely a false story. And the media outlets that helped RAP, they were just friends, and they helped RAP to save its reputation that it was already criticized. The RAB is already criticized by Human Rights Watch or international human rights organization, even by the politicians in the country, for its involvement in extrajudicial killings.
So it was a smear campaign.
Yeah, so it was just to get some good reputation that RAB was protecting human rights. So when I found out that story, I went to my employer and told them that it was my finding. They denied to publish that, and I waited for 6 months. They denied to publish that. I resigned from there. I joined another news outlet. They resigned. They denied to publish that too. So then we decided to shoot a documentary out of this, and it was an underground shooting.
Yeah, the documentary.
Yeah. And then we had it released online, so social media connections,
Right.
and it had great impacts.
How long was it, the documentary?
It is 1 hour and 5 minutes, 65 minutes around.
Okay. And after it came out, you said it was widely viewed?
We had an open premiere because nobody ever thought about doing this kind of thing in Bangladesh since the RAB emerged around 2005. So we had it open for all kinds of people in Russian Cultural Center, and we had a house full of audience. Even some of them were standing and sitting on the stairs, and we had several shows like this in the city.
Okay. And what was the impact of that exposure?
The impact is about the awareness of the people who watched this. They were more courageous. And since then, many of them were talking about these kinds of practices against this kind of force.
Was there any threats made against you and others involved?
Yeah, throughout the time I investigated it, and when I began shooting it, this documentary, even one of the topmost government officers whom we selected to be interviewed for this documentary, he said that you would be banished into the air just at a signal from this force. So why don't you stop and go back? So these kind of things.
And were you really seriously feared for your life then while you were putting this documentary together?
Yes, though one of my friend was its director. I was just researcher and investigator, and there were cameramen that they were also my friends. Some of them decided not to publish their names at first. So when we completed it, we were convinced that it was a great job. So they decided to publish their name. But still, we all were afraid of our life and our family members as well.
So this crackdown on the bloggers, do you see what kind of response has social media had to this? Are they
very
outraged?
bad? After the arrest of the 4 bloggers. Well, still social media has this thing that you will always find all kinds of people there. So you will find Islamist radicalists there too, who supports the arrest of the blogger.
Right.
Not only support, they think that these bloggers should have been beheaded. Should have been beheaded for their preaching against the religion.
Okay.
So, but those who try to think, those who try to make a difference, or they try to protest it, and many of them made their profile picture with their fist hitting in the air.
I'm sorry, say it again.
Some of them made a profile picture on the Facebook profile.
Right.
There was a profile picture that you are fitting your fist into the air.
Okay.
With a red background as a protest against this arrest.
Okay. And have there been any physical protests against this?
Yes, there have been a lot of physical protests in Shahbag, around Shahbag, in different kind of universities and across the country. They formed human chain, and they brought out processions. They brought out torch processions across the country to demand the release of the bloggers.
Okay. And what do you think is going to happen?
It's pretty much a political question. I think they are caught in the political battle in Bangladesh, the bloggers, because the Shahbag movement is all about getting the war criminals who supported Pakistan in 1971 against the freedom of independence war of Bangladesh. So the Shabak movement was to hang all of them. The government has just begun a trial of war criminals just a couple of years ago. So what the Shabak movement demand is that all these war criminals must be hanged because they are identified. There are a lot of evidence against them. So when this Shabak movement started, those Islamist people became very angry because those who were accused on these charges are the leaders of the biggest Islamist party in Bangladesh. So they tried to save their leaders. So all these theories about atheisms, bloggers is nothing. It's political propaganda created by Islamist radicalists there who want to save their leaders from this war crime trial, who want to end this trial, and the Shabak movement is against that. They just demand justice be prevailed.
And so, finally, overall, when you go back to Bangladesh, are you hopeful that maybe the people, these bloggers, will be freed and the social media crackdown won't continue, or are you afraid that conditions could get worse?
We are expecting our general national election next year. So I already told you that this is completely a political thing.
Yes.
This is completely a political thing. These bloggers have been writing about their religious beliefs, the difference between religion and science for the last 5 years. But suddenly they are branded as atheist bloggers just for this war crimes trial. So this has made a platform for people, young people, who are getting together just to say no to this kind of old tradition of politics, mixing religion with politics. And I hope a good future because young people are there to raise a voice against these war crimes.
Are you concerned that Bangladesh may end up with an Islamist government that becomes more of a theocracy?
Sorry?
Are you worried that with the next round of elections that it could get worse, so that people who want to impose their religious beliefs on the people, that they will get elected? Or?
I don't think so, because what happened to Egypt, you see that. I don't think so, because most of the young people and those people, educated people, they are against these things because they know that war crimes and what happens when you are so much religious, and you are abusing religion for years, for centuries. So I think a good future for Bangladesh because these people are getting together. So I don't think the Islamist radicalists will do much better in the next election.
Well, it's been a real pleasure talking with you, and I hope that when you get back to Bangladesh, that you can make a positive difference for your viewers and listeners.
Nice talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you. That was my interview with Emran Hossain, recorded in early July. Before we continue our discussion, I want to remind everyone that you can view or listen to this program anytime by downloading our podcasts at globaljournalist.org. You can also find interesting articles, photos, and interviews related to our program on our website. Please send us questions or comments via globaljournalist@kbia.org or our Facebook page. And you can follow us on Twitter at globaljorn. Khalid Khattak works for the News International in Pakistan. And Waqas Banoori writes for the Independent Press Network in Islamabad. He's also a columnist for the Frontier Post. That's the first English daily in Peshawar, one of the country's poorest areas and a hotbed for terrorist activity. The two joined me in the studio to talk about the dangers of being a reporter in Pakistan and the profound impact of the war on terror inside their country. You recently wrote a blog about your visit to the 9/11 memorial. Can you tell us about your experience there and reflect on that?
As I mentioned in my blog, I was really sad to visit that place, and my sadness was because of the loss Pakistan faced afterwards, as well as the loss US faced at that time. But I would say, and we generally do say in Pakistan, that we have had many 9/11s after that single incident, and we lost more people and we lost more property than United States. And we are now in an endless war against terrorism, and God knows where and when this will end.
Our losses are much more than the US loss. Uh, in total, we have lost more than 40,000 people, and an economy which has a annual budget of $33 billion, it has lost over $100 billion, which has been recently said in an economic survey, that we have lost over $100 billion in this war. Our infrastructure is damaged. We had one tunnel in all Pakistan, even that was damaged. So our people, our psychology has changed. I mean, when you have threat, that you move out and you do not know whether you would come back home or not safe. It's quite appalling, It's quite understandable that your thoughts are changed. You cannot live the way you were living. It's not peace at all.
Right.
Yeah.
How dangerous is it to be a journalist in Pakistan?
Frankly speaking, like when we compare it with United States or any developed or advanced country, it's 1,000% more dangerous than any other developed country. So the danger the journalists face in Pakistan, like it is not just those who are working like in the areas where there is this war on terror is going on, this operation against extremists is being carried out. The threat is everywhere. The threat is from people from like different organizations and of course from extremists as well. So generally speaking, like if I'm a reporter in Lahore, in a big city, so the threat is that whenever there is unfortunately some kind of bomb blast or such incident, so we are on risk, and this happens quite frequently.
So you're at risk from both
Yes.
terrorism activities and from people who don't like what you're writing about.
Yes, and they could be anybody. Okay, it's not necessarily that just intelligence agencies would threaten you and would react against you.
Right.
Any individual can be against you.
And why does this go on so extensively? Would you say, because of the impunity, because it's not being cracked down on enough? The people who killed journalists aren't prosecuted?
Somehow you can say. Frankly, like yesterday only, one of the major politicians in Pakistan, he commented in United Kingdom that there are more than 30 Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan groups in Pakistan alone. We know one Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, but there are 30 different smaller groups, and there are many other groups. So what happens? We have threat from them. We have threat from the state institutions as well. For example, that also goes once you are actually infringing, when you are leaving the boundaries, If you are working in the boundaries that the state has allowed, it's okay. If you are going out of it...
In other words, if you report about corruption.
Yes, corruption is... Now it's easier to report on corruption. Civil government is not that dangerous now. But if you're reporting about sensitive subjects such as radicalization or militancy or activities of security agencies, then you are in danger.
Let's move on to the overall media landscape in Pakistan, how it's changed in recent years, and the impact of social media, and how has the prevalence of social media changed the way journalism is practiced in Pakistan?
Yes, like what I have observed over the years, there is a visible difference. Like earlier we used to have stagnant websites. So today we have more interactive websites having multimedia, having videos, having photographs and such, all these details. So it's been changing, and the change is good. And obviously, like we as a journalist are reaching to more and more people through social media, such as like microblogging website, Twitter and Facebook. So this is amazing.
Okay. And Waqas, is it making the media more free, more independent?
I would say Pakistan has recently got wave of electronic media that has impacted more rather than the social media, because we have like highest trends of poverty in Pakistan. We have illiteracy. People do not know how to use computers. Hardly, like I think 20 or 30% people can speak English. So that 70% lot you are leaving out for social media. So I see the trend of this electronic media in Urdu, which has played a more strengthening role for free media in society.
How are women's rights getting better in Pakistan in recent years, or is it because of the rise of extremism in some cases getting worse?
In some parts, actually, it is. I mean, the urban centers in the country, Islamabad, Lahore, and Karachi, we have good freedoms for women. Still, there are cases, but they are minimal. Overall, in the rural societies, the society hasn't changed. The education is very low. Poverty is very much around there. So that's the reason that women's rights aren't that visible over there. But overall, in the country, I see there is a change with this free media, this, the breaking news items, even reporting of such small incident. Like once, there was a time in Pakistan, if someone had thrown acid on a woman, that would just get a small media report. Now we have a breaking news item in the main television channels. So of course that changes with time, and that has had an impact in Pakistan.
And finally, let's talk about the progress for both democracy and free press. With a new prime minister, I imagine there's some more hopes. Waqas, what are your hopes and predictions for the future of democracy and free media in Pakistan?
I think Pakistan is much changed now. We know that it is the first ever time in the history that a democratic government has had a transition period, and they give power to another democratic government. And overall, the people are more participating in the electoral process. Overall, the media is very much pro-democracy. They are all standing up for one cause, that we have to stand for democracy. The military is also very much, the security institutions, all institutions, state institutions, have now accepted that democracy is the way forward for Pakistan. And of course, they understand that free media also plays some role, rather a major role. Somehow there are sections in the society, in the state institutions, which we think that they might actually have conflicting views, they might be opposed to democracy. But overall, the society, the media, the state institutions, they are all towards democracy.
That was my interview with Khalid Khattak and Waqas Banoori, recorded in early July. Global Journalist is produced by the Reynolds Journalism Institute and the Missouri School of Journalism. The show is directed by Travis McMillan, audio by Pat Akers. Raymond Tungakar is our executive producer. Join us again next week for another Global Journalist. I'm David Reed.